when you think that you know where you stand. You've got the world in your hand. Just when you think that you know all the facts. Just when you're sure and you're safe, it changes. Why, oh, why?
Being unfair with others, yet enabling certain people to do what you didn't let the others do. For example, Wuchang, Rustled Jimmies, has a video game where it depicts women in a negative manner. But what about those other 99 problems? But Rustled Jimmies ain't one. Alright, that was fucking retarded. What's up, everybody? This is Escape Room Plug, though some call me Plug from the ScapeROMFiles. And this is probably going to be one of the most pissed off rants I've done in some time. And it's also one where, if people are going to argue that I'm not getting to the point, congratulations! You have won a special admittance fee for a video where I just talk about a lot of bullshit with the main point that no one can decide on what game goes too far. And apparently a game that not only copies Black Myth Wuchang, a game that people complained that it wasn't diverse enough. Now we have a game that's not only a Souls-like, which, for once, is the least of my problems with this fucking game, but a review of the game is that one of the main negative points is the modern-day equivalent of too much water, in that it depicts women in a demeaning way. Jesus H. Tap Dancing Christ. Where in the holy goddamn do I even begin to explain why no one is legally allowed to use that as a complaint in reviews today? Let's go back to plenty of games, some which may be big or small, impactful or otherwise, essay or biography. Just explain why all of you are wrong. And I am right. Loud and wrong until it is done. Metal Gear Solid is a video game that Hideo Kojima has given a lot of people into the idea of that a game can have both storytelling and gameplay. Essentially a more advanced version of what Ninja Gaiden did back in the NES. 3 times, as a matter of fact. And yes, I know it's a port, quote-unquote, of an arcade game that people only know of unless they played one of the Xbox ports which had the arcade game, or actually played it back in the arcades, or know of it because of Iron Man, that song that, even though I don't really like the song, it is with ever such regret that the man, the myth, the legend, Ozzy Osbourne has passed away. Metal Gear Solid has a character by the name of Meryl, and Solid Snake kinda hits on her quite a bit. People actually find this act demeaning. Does anyone care that a dude who looks like he's older than he looks, or sounds older than he actually is hitting on a girl who is essentially vulnerable, and your fate is dependent on whether you can endure the bullshit of torture or not? No. Because the internet wasn't full of cesspool idiots, or if they were just in the underground of the internet, like PlayStation Underground, but a lot less, well, annoying, I guess. But what about the hit sequel, Metal Gear Solid 2? A black character, or whatever fucking skin tone that she has, whatever, Fortune, a lady who just wants to die, but then we get that infamous quote from Ocelot that there is no magic in this world. Yet the entire series of Metal Gear Solid, its main excuse for anything and everything is nanomachines. For those saying, well, that is the English dub, sir. English dubs is no good. If you're gonna cite Metal Gear Solid 2 as a bad game because of a mistranslation, Use the real version of Metal Gear Solid 2, you fucking retard!
お前に弾が当たらないのは魔術でも気候でもましてや超能力でもない。すべては愛国者たちによる演出。これがその仕掛けだ。今のテクノロジーを使えば奇跡も幻想も作り出せる。
Then we get Metal Gear Solid 3. I'm just gonna let Synthetic Man explain this one.
I'm gonna red pill some of you motherfuckers. I'm not a contrarian who thinks the Metal Gear games are bad or anything. I think they're great games. But Metal Gear Solid 3 was one of the forerunners of girl bosses, okay? The boss is one of the worst, like, feminist characters that had ever existed at that time, especially in gaming. The greatest soldier who ever lived was a woman in the fucking 60s. You're an absolutely autistic, delusional, probably brain-dead weeb if you don't think that's woke.
Yes, because apparently the boss is what modern-day woke stuff is. Look, I like the dude, but this point is just so fucking retarded it's not even funny. Then we get to Metal Gear Solid 4, the game that essentially throws all of the plot away in favor of nonsense and bullshit spanned into a feature-length film, and somehow makes returning Chinese waifu Mei Ling turn into a thirst trap for a dude who has constant diarrhea but ends up marrying Meryl because of that one faithful encounter back on Shadow Moses in 2005. Then a year later, Sonic 06 came out. And then we get Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. That game has Quiet in it, who is just a humanized version of a plant, or as some people would call it, an excuse for a girl to be bathing in a shower and all that shit. Now, look, I know that Kojima isn't exactly the most gracious gentleman nowadays, but he's made plenty of female characters who are actually more than just blatant fan service. And with the exception of Quiet, I wouldn't consider any female character in Metal Gear Solid to be as demeaning as Wuchang Fallen Jimmies has done, alright? There are plenty of waifus in the Metal Gear series. Hell, even Holly from Metal Gear 2 could be a decent waifu. Or even Jennifer, or the lady that you can only talk to if you have 4 stars or better, because she is proud. You know, proud? No, not proud family. Proud. Sure, why not? Quiet is just made for blatant fan service, and the only reason people like her is because she has a AI ability that's actually useful compared to Dog or whoever else is on the team. Maybe even the horse might be more useful, I guess, since, you know, you don't fuck up the adaptive difficulty system that makes Max Payne look like a fucking joke. I think you see my point with Metal Gear Solid. And no, don't tell me about Death Stranding, because nobody uses the demeaning argument unless it's for women, okay? That shit is so dumb. Like, look at all the people who react towards the mods for Resident Evil 2 Remake with Mr. X wearing a Speedo or Leon having chapless ass or whatever. Nobody uses that shit unironically because people don't realize that demeaning could also be not only in a sexual manner, but also in a fan-servicey manner. And I don't think I really need to dig up that old entire topic again now, do I? Let's get to the other IPs that have been known to be dragged under the mud because it demeans women, okay? Let's talk about Tomb Raider. No, not that Tomb Raider. There you go. And yes, it did start off life as a Sega Saturn game. I don't care if people want to use the excuse that, oh, well, in North America, it came out on PlayStation and Saturn the same year. The original Tomb Raider was a month-long, timed exclusive running at 50 Hz on the Saturn. Deal with it, motherfuck. There's so many people who gave Lara Croft shit for being a demeaning character, and it doesn't help that PlayStation Magazine at the time gave so many suggestive artworks and shit. If this were to happen today, unless your name is Capcom, or if it's an IP that can get away with such shit, we're going to talk about that too later on. you people would call these people pedophiles, actually harming real women because, God forbid, is a sexy woman on screen. This shit just spans back as 96, or hell, maybe even earlier with Super Mario Brothers, or any other game as a matter of fact, just because they don't have strong, independent, black woman who can stand on her own 2 feet and isn't afraid of men. But somehow this fucking Souls-like is the one game that just completely defiles women in some weird way, even though, believe it or not, there is an actual demographic for such things, whether you like it or not, and it only takes one Google engine search to find exactly the type of shit that I'm talking about. Is it taboo? Sure. Most people who do that shit for a living would cross that line that I don't think anybody wants to talk about. Hell, even I don't feel comfortable talking about it. But this shit with Rustled Jimmies is just so dumb, and I don't know why people act as if this game, which ironically comes from a series that is known to have some of the most inhumane, fucking deprived of fan service in games because people kind of focus on shit a little bit too much. It's the same demographic, by the way, that probably got mad at Berserk. You know, Berserk, the thing that Demon Souls essentially took a little bit too much inspiration of. Like, almost every iteration of From Software's Demon Souls IP, there's a bunch of Berserk references, and they even do it more than once. Let's talk about Nier Automata. There are people who actually make the claim that having Rule 34 of 2B is disgusting because the game is more than that. There's an actual depth and story and shit. When last I checked, you people literally use the same shit with something like Doom because, well, Doom is never about the story. It's like a porno. It's nice, but it's not necessary. But then it's all the fucking people talk about with Nier Automata, which either tells you that people either didn't play the game, or they look at that one aspect and assume it's the whole fucking thing. You didn't play Elden Ring, so you can't talk shit about it. First of all, fuck you. Second of all, I know that the game is a Souls-like. I'm sure that the game is going to have depth to its characters. I mean, you can practically go that shit for free by looking up Vati. Not that one, unfortunately. That one's actually pretty cool. This fucking community of people who get tired of all the sex shit, but then only talk about the sex shit, is part of the fucking problem. Something like Stellar Blade that was hyped up to be nothing more than just Bayonetta, Nier Automata hybrid, but then turns out to be a shitty Souls-like, is why people are just not allowed to talk about this shit anymore, because it's fucking retarded. Hell, even the creative censorship that was in the game, people got pissed off about it. Now, if it was Capcom, then they wouldn't care, because Capcom could do no wrong in fan service, and people eat that shit up. Just look at Street Fighter 6. Unless you're Loli, then that's problematic. But Lady D from Resident Evil Village? Sure, be a fucking degenerate creep about how you want. By the way, her outfit isn't really that original as far as horror vibes go. There's a whole genre of artwork out there that depicts characters in such ways, and people have a pretty goddamn big fetish of giantess women, okay? And I don't really get it, to be honest. Like, it's not like Sanko levels of depraved. First of all, the game still sucks. I don't care if people got mad at me, or will get mad at me for saying that game is a piece of shit, when it kind of is, but I played much better games, let alone, I can't even fucking talk about this, hentai games that have more story and depth. And you're probably wondering, well, why don't you talk about that? First of all, mind your own fucking business. And second of all, you're going to use the information and turn it against me and then make me something to be that I'm not. That's going to be a discussion on a platform like YouTube to go into. But just know that I have actually played these types of games that at least tried to have a fucking story or a plot. And sometimes it doesn't always work out that well. At worst, it's just a story that's there to waste your time. Or, even more worse, a game that just is so unoptimized, even for something like RPG Maker, which should be so easily made in today's stratosphere, or even at worst, just being a complete clusterfuck of a story that would give a lot of AAA titles a run for its money. And of course, there's always the easiest way out, just being a bad game, period. Yes, there do exist bad H games, and yes, there also do exist bad doujins and whatever shit you want to call it, manga, whatever, that is there to please people in ways that shouldn't be really talked about on a public platform, but can still end up being a shit product, and that's because the fan service isn't for them. But somehow this game, this Rustled Jimmies game, is the one that just ruffles people's jimmies for no other reason because it's not From Software. If this shit was by From Software and the women in the game had like bare feet, I guarantee the fucking fan base would just cream all over themselves because they have like a public foot fetish thing, and I don't care if it's a fucking meme or that it's like a joke or whatever. Like, these people will unironically simp over characters' feet, and there's a difference between having a fetish and, you know, not being a fucking degenerate about it, and then there's just giving people like that one Let's Play who was out to be a pretty uncomfortable person to be around with, and it is mocked for all eternity just because he happens to be in a thing that he would like, even if it's the most tame shit in the world. It's mocked for a reason. It's fucking stupid. What about games like this Gaia, okay? I'm probably saying it wrong. I don't give a shit. That game is essentially anime incorporated with all the cliches of anime and shit, like the lolis, the characters who have big jugs and shit and even have their frames of animation, having jiggle physics and shit. But the thing with this guy is that it is not only an addicting tactics role-playing game, but it also has a pretty damn good story. Even if it's not the absolute best at it, it still makes you think. And shocking, both the English and Japanese dubs are pretty good, whether you like Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, look at these. It's got a compelling story that makes you care about the characters, and the gameplay, shocking, can keep you engaged when you just want to go for the main story arc, or keep going for the post-game, or the in-between, the filler arc, while actively bonding with the characters that you made. And at least in the first game, the enemies that you kill, you can recruit them, and the more that you kill, the less mana it costs, so you can get more easily. Shocking. A game that has a trifecta, appealing character designs, good gameplay, and a fucking plot that isn't completely wasting your time. But, surprise, surprise, it comes from Japan, that isn't made by Capcom. So the people at Nipple Itching Software are a bunch of pedophiles because they have character classes that look a little bit too suspect, so we're gonna have to use that
Loli is anime CP.
shit, and it's just fucking retarded. You don't have to like that shit, but unless it's someone who's actually working at Nipple Itching Software turns out to be a degenerate and is actually harming people,
You need to shut the fuck up!
games like this Gaia exist and happens to be a pretty damn successful game at that. It's mainly a PlayStation IP, and yes, I know it had a one game on the DS, but I guess we can't have a Nintendo representative of Smash in such ways because Smash is for good boys and girls. So we'll go ahead and have characters like Joker, a series from fucking Atlas, who's known to have pretty damn mature themes that people don't care because, hey guys, look, it's funny, wahoo man. And Bayonetta, a character who at base value is just a sexy character who does fancy moves and you get to see her skin. Oh shit. I remember people also being pretty vocal about Bayonetta as a character who was demeaning towards women when that's just... Do these people even fucking play these games? Even as someone who didn't care for Bayonetta, I could at least say the first game at least had a pretty decent story, but as with something like Metal Gear Solid or other games, the cuts just kind of run a little too long, and for a game that's essentially character-driven or whatever, that has combat arenas akin to whatever the hell Modern Doom is, I don't know, I kind of forgot at this point. It wasn't something exactly of interest, which is funny because games like Anarchy Reigns has a much more compelling action gameplay loop and wasn't entirely fucking bore. It's also funny because Bayonetta was actually a DLC character in that game and also has female characters in that game that would put this fucking Rustled Jimmies game to shame. But remember, it's this game that makes people pissed off because it demeans women. But ever since, like, the birth of video games, even as far back as the Atari 2600, where you're playing as Custer, whose main goal is to rape a woman for points, that's not demeaning enough. But playing a modern-day video game where you're playing as a chick with elements of women being deprived or whatever, that's bad, even though it's a fucking game based on a genre who has some pretty decent waifus and shit. But this is the game that makes people pissed off. Go fuck yourselves, all of you. If you think that this is the game that breaks the camel's back, you got a pretty damn long way to go. This shit is going to exist as long as people have lusts and desires that cannot be satisfied by artwork alone. And unfortunately, some people kind of take this shit way too far, which is not good. Oh my god, this shit is just so dumb. Like, why are people, like, mad at this game of all things when there's just so much worse out there? People just don't care about anything at all unless it has giant tits and shit. It's just fucking dumb. Unless you're Capcom, you can't do anything with fan service, and it's fucking retarded. Where do people get off on saying that this game is the game that is demeaning towards women? What about games like Mortal Kombat, a series that's known for its blood and gore, and the fact that people actually get off to the likes of Japanese animations and other games and shit like Capcom and Nier Automata? How about all those other people that get pissed off in Mortal Kombat 11 for demeaning women, even though most of the time the game is all about that blood and gore, but people also tell us that Mortal Kombat is more about the blood and gore, when people don't care about that, because, look, little Timmy, Scorpion killed somebody in a really cool way. Aren't I edgy? Oh, but wait, that's bad too, because apparently Ed Boon made people watch something like Schindler's List as a reference to all the violent shit that Mortal Kombat has to do. They're essentially putting all the resources to making the fatalities and graphics as best as they can for 4K ray tracing, but also making every other bit of quality as lowering as possible, if that makes sense. Character rosters, shit. Stories, shit. Music, shit. Presentable graphics, shit. DLC practices, shit. Mortal Kombat, a game series that has focused on violence first, has an issue with characters having bouncing breasts and costumes are a little too revealing, which is why something like Fortnite, a game for kids, by the way, has costumes from Mortal Kombat that are essentially toned down, but people have unironically found ways to make characters like Raven Team Leader, Calamity, or even other characters of the opposite gender or whatever in between into blatant sex objects. Let's amplify the sex up in a game made for kids. You also want to know what else is made for kids? Pokemon! That game isn't known for demeaning women in any way, which is why all those games, at least in the Game Boy, had character graphics that were too explicit. So when Nintendo America went to censor it, people got mad, but I guess it's okay because those characters are too young looking. But if they look at something like this Gaia and realize that shit wasn't necessarily toned down, they would legit have a field date and want to get that shit canceled. But I'll digress on that last part. Sorry! What about other games that aren't exactly intent on making characters demeaning because of their value? What about games like Overwatch? A game that's only played now because of character designs that are essentially safe horny. That's another thing. Apparently Blizzard is aware of the fact that people are essentially ripping models from Overwatch and turning them into full-length pornographies. A game company who is known to make quite the appealing number of characters draws the line at a game that's all about hero shooters in a team-based objective game with pretty much no real story to it, gets mad at people for essentially using their characters for sex. But let me wrap it up because I'm rambling like a motherfucker. Rustled Jimmies, the game that's essentially Dark Souls but with demeaning women, you people have no right to complain about anything that is demeaning to women anymore when this is the game that makes you piss off. Which is funny because last I checked, there are games that are actually bad in that aspect, but I don't think this is even close to it. You people are just retarded, and then the next day, when Capcom releases Resident Evil 9 and there's a character like Lady D, you'll go back to being piece of shit, degenerate losers who will get off to anything. But when Ashley Graham comes back, or when Team Blooper, the same company that made The Medium, by the way, that gave a pass to the Silent Hill 2 remake, and now they're apparently going to be touching the original, which is going to be whatever, I don't want to fucking talk about that. And then when they no doubt remake Silent Hill 3, the game that has a little girl as a protagonist, you'll get pissed off and call all this pedophiles for getting off to little girls and shit. You people have such ridiculous, contradicting standards that just makes me wonder what your actual views on consent are. Whether you take it away or give it. Now go get pissed off at Berserk for the 10th time this week on Twitter, you piece of shit.
And now for something completely different.
Dinner's ready. Where's Grandpa?
Loli is anime CP.